A little summation. Perhaps you've experienced and are experiencing these phenomena, or explicitly the phenomena that when we live and abide in a state of perpetual stillness, or living in the now as it's commonly called, and the experiences of life, in other words, the movement of life, meet this stillness, the Dharma, the will of God, the purpose of life, is enacted. And in its enactment, we become privy to the arcane laws, the so-called mysteries of life. And we've been exploring those laws through stories over these last months. But the stories of the last weeks have been related pointedly to the laws relating to stillness. But today's story is related to the law that's behind movement. But that allows a circle to come around. And that circle is about that which has been quoted for so long now, related to the movement of energies via the perceptions of life. And that you know quite well. Take all perceptions from the sensual, the aesthetic, and the transcendent levels of mind, and bring them to the subtle level of body, speech, and mind. The body of appearances, the speech of vibrations, and the mind of awareness, from where they will flow down the channels at the side of the spine, subjective and objective, male, female, positive, negative, to rise up the central column of pure mind, to emerge as our thoughts and our deeds. Let's see with this story whether we can put this together to allow us to recognize a fundamental arcane law that arises out of this direct and moment-by-moment experience of the input of perceptions. We all know well the great beings, almost godlike, of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Now they had a relationship, and there's a story about their first meeting. King Solomon knew of the great beauty, wealth, and indeed the powers of the Queen of Sheba. So when she was to come and visit him in his kingdom, he had everything polished to within an inch of its life. Every gold ornament was shining and glistening. His throne was polished and scrubbed. Everything was in a state of heightened perfection, you might say. But when the Queen of Sheba arrived with her entourage, her beauty and the accoutrements that she brought with her outshone even the most glistening of King Solomon's treasures that were displayed. With great pomp and sound she entered, with musicians and dancers dressed in silk, with cymbals clanging, the sound of her bracelets and her anklets adding to the music of the presence that almost was overwhelming to King Solomon sitting there on his throne. And then, amidst all of this, the Queen of Sheba presented gifts to King Solomon. Now it was known by the Queen of Sheba that King Solomon had a ring that allowed him to know the language of the animals and the birds. But the Queen of Sheba presented him with a gift that was a number of peacocks with the most magnificent tails. And to the great surprise of King Solomon, when he looked at the wonderful feathers of these peacocks, and he looked at that eye that we know very well is in the center, he found that he could know the past and the future. And then she gave him other gifts that equaled his own abilities. This was a great surprise to him. But then the Queen of Sheba clapped her hands. The dancing stopped and the music ceased. The dancers, stately with all their silks, became like statues, and a great silence reigned in the throne room of King Solomon. The Queen of Sheba then spoke to King Solomon and said, "I have heard of your great abilities and your wisdom and indeed your magic. So I wonder if you would then mind answering 3 riddles, just so I can confirm your state." King Solomon nodded and said, "Ask your riddles." The Queen of Sheba said, "Tell me, great king, what is it that stands straight, but has a head which bows like a wilted reed, which brings enhancement to the rich, but is a sign and an emblem of the poor, is known by the dead, loved by the birds, and hated by the fish?" Without a moment's hesitation, King Solomon said, "Why, it is the plant hemp, because hemp is used to make the finest linens, which are an adornment of the rich. Simple garments are made of it, which are worn by the poor. It is made into shrouds to cover the dead. The seeds are loved by the birds. It is hated by the fish, because it is out of the nets that catch them." Everyone was aghast at this great knowledge and wisdom. And then the Queen of Sheba asked the second riddle. "What is it that does not fall from the heavens, nor from the mountains, or out of the great oceans, but is water. Immediately, the king said, "Why, it is the tears of man. It neither falls from the sky, nor rises from the oceans. It can taste sweet or as bitter as aloe." Again, everyone was aghast at the wisdom of King Solomon. But then the Queen of Sheba clapped her hands again, and in came 2 servants carrying vases of flowers. The vases of flowers were placed before King Solomon. Queen of Sheba said, "One of these vases contains the flowers created by nature. The other are flowers created by my artisans. I ask of you now, which is the vase containing the real flowers?" Now King Solomon looked at these 2 vases, and there could be seen no apparent difference between either. He gazed and gazed with great attention and concentration. And then he noticed a drop of dew on a rose petal. Yes, but then, looking at the other vase, there too was a drop of dew on the identical rose petal. But King Solomon was patient and humble, and he continued to gaze at these 2 vases when suddenly a bee flew in the window, and a servant was about to chase it away when King Solomon said, "No, wait. Let the bee do what it will." And of course, King Solomon knew that by its very nature, the bee would know the difference between the real and the unreal. Immediately, the bee flew to the center of the real rose, and King Solomon pointed to indicate that this, indeed, was the vase containing those flowers created by nature. Now both he and the Queen of Sheba, being wise, knew that mankind, with all his knowledge, could but rely on the wisdom of life as it is in nature, even the smallest bee being our teacher. This is why the Queen of Sheba bowed and acknowledged the great wisdom, humility of King Solomon. Both of them bowed to that which life brought. How does this story, putting it together, with that which we live at every moment, taking in the perceptions of life, allowing those perceptions to flow down the columns, subjective, objective, male, female, and rise up as our thoughts and our deeds to bring about an enactment, the ability to be able to witness and experience and live the arcane laws and the mysteries. But what would you say is the mystery, the law, related to this particular story? What is your experience of life now?
What has been will be.
Nearby hymns another day.
The arcane law of life will be what it is.
Absolutely right, yes. Good answer. What have you discovered now in this place of perpetual stillness? And the experiences of life come and meet us.
You have to go with the flow. Like if you resist the things that are coming, because you don't want to do them, or you have some idea in your head about it, then it's harder. It doesn't just flow along.
All right.
So you just go with it in the moment.
Or would you say in this place where stillness and movement meet, there's no space for conditioning? Or the past? It's always new. The response is always new. It's not coming from some preconditioned mind.
Yeah, the awareness to be in the present tends to increase and negate the influences from the past.
Yes.
It cancels it out.
Absolutely. Cancels out any possibility that what we give out is conditioned by our mind's accumulations. Isn't it so? Isn't this what you're finding? When we're still, and that movement of life comes in, that experience, that encounter, what comes up as a response, because it's, as to use that parlance, cancelled each other out, the response is from that enactment, is that enactment of the divine will.
It sometimes feels like it, when I'm in that place and movement happens from the outside, it's like a pebble falling in the water, and like awaiting what will the ripples be.
Yes, yes, yes. Will they
Sometimes
be
it's a
curly?
big
Will
stone
they,
and
yes,
there's a lot
will
of
they be circular?
waves.
Will they be
Sometimes
elliptical? Yes, yes, yes. It's a beautiful metaphor for it.
Signified beautifully by that third example where he just waited
Yes,
all the rows.
yes.
Just being in the moment, observing, noticing the bee and that provided the answer.
Absolutely.
Being in that presence,
Being in that presence,
Yeah.
being in that
not
state.
reacting.
Yes.